So thank you, and thank you for coming here this afternoon. So again, my name is Jennifer Sime, and I'm the Senior Vice President for U.S. Programs for the International Rescue Committee. We run a network of 26 offices throughout the country, and we support refugees and other groups, not just with resettlement, but also with a host of other complementary programs that include food and agriculture, mental health, financial literacy, and so forth. We're also present internationally in more than 40 countries, and IRC is quite unique in that it really covers the arc of the crisis. So we begin working with refugees in their countries of origin when they're being displaced. Then we follow them when they leave. So just to give you an example, we're working inside of Syria. We're also working with Syrians in Iraq, Lebanon, Jordan, and Turkey. We have then followed them through Europe, and we have a presence in Greece and in Serbia, and soon to open an office also in Germany. And then we support the Syrian refugees that are being resettled here in the United States. So we work through the arc of the crisis, and that is one of the things that is unique to our organization. So I'm really delighted to be here today, and I'd like to very briefly introduce my fellow panelists, who will then tell you a little bit more about themselves and the organizations that they work with. So first, Claudia Connor, who's President and CEO of the International Institute of Connecticut. Welcome, Claudia. Zeyba Rahman, Senior Program Officer for the Building Bridges Program at the Doris Duke Foundation. And Sokeo Ros, he's the director of the Everett Hip Hop Dance Program and director of the hip hop dance troupe Case Closed. So thank you all for being here today. So what I wanted to do to frame the discussion really is to kind of talk a little bit about some of the basics and some of the terminology that we use, and make sure that we're sort of all on the same page and understanding what we're talking about. So last November, you may recall, after the attacks in Paris, there was a big backlash against refugees in this country, and we had 30 governors who, the attacks were on a Friday. By Monday or Tuesday of the following week, had decided that they wanted to not to resettle refugees in their states, and had written a number of letters to the State Department, and it became a big thing. So through that process, I was doing a lot of media and talking to a lot of journalists, and I realized that as I was talking to people, that there really wasn't an understanding of who a refugee is. And so I wanted to go over that definition and talk a little bit about it. So according to the Refugee Convention of 1951, a refugee is somebody who has been forced to flee his or her country because of persecution, war, or violence. A refugee has a well-founded fear of persecution for reasons of race, religion, nationality, political opinion, or membership in a particular group. So that is the definition of a refugee. So the people that are coming here as refugees meet this definition, and they are basically escaping violence in their countries. Refugees, by virtue of their status, have certain protections that other immigrants may not have. So, for example, one of the things that refugees have when they arrive in this country is that they are authorized to work basically as soon as they arrive, which is not something that all immigrants have. Immigrants, on the other hand, may migrate for a number of different reasons. Sometimes they also migrate because of fear of persecution and because of violence in their home countries. But there's other reasons that may come into play, such as economic reasons, academic reasons, or even family reunification. So that's kind of what those two terms mean. I now want to talk a little bit about what the U.S. government does as soon as a refugee is determined to be allowed to come into the United States. And in the panel today, we're talking a lot about culture. So one of the first things that happens when somebody is notified that they will be admitted to the United States is that they go through what we call cultural orientation. And cultural orientation is not synonymous with integration or assimilation or anything like that. It's really just, practical cultural knowledge. So it's a process to orient the refugee to their new environment. And the U.S. government has 9 resettlement support centers throughout the world. IRC actually manages one of those centers in East Asia. And staff at these centers basically call these people who have now been authorized to come to the United States as refugees, and they provide them with this cultural orientation before traveling. And the idea is that they will be familiarized with the environment that they're going to find upon arrival. So there is a standard curriculum that covers a large range of topics, and there are things as diverse as the geography of the United States, the weather, the importance of employment, social services, and basic cultural norms. This is then reinforced when the refugee comes to the United States, and they have to go again through another process of cultural orientation that is a little bit more in-depth and specific. And the idea is to give them the basic knowledge that they need to help them maneuver their new environment successfully. So one of the things that we would do here in the United States, in New York City, for example, is teach people how to use the subway system, teach people how to use the ATM, how to make sure they don't confuse a $10 bill with a $100 bill. So these are some of the things that you would go through. And in the cultural orientation overseas, one of the things that I witnessed as I was sitting in on some of these classes was that people are shown different pictures of people from different races and ethnicities. And they ask the refugees, okay, which of these people do you think are Americans? And then they answer. And the idea there is to show them that the United States is made up of a lot of different people that look very different. And so that they don't come with a preconceived notion of what an American is supposed to look like. So they really cover those kinds of topics. And cultural orientation is basically a building block for refugees that is obviously very important, but it's just really the first step in a process that is much longer. So I wanted to also go over a couple of terms that are also used often interchangeably, but they're actually quite different. So I wanted to touch on what is integration and what is assimilation. And assimilation actually is in the title of our panel today. But they're quite different. And historically in the United States, assimilation basically has largely been associated with newcomers conforming to the white or Anglo communities. So even though this theory has evolved and recognizes that American society is heterogeneous, the assumption is still that there is an underlying assimilation, that there should be one dominant homogeneous culture, being the Anglo culture. So, of course, what this tells us is that there is an unequal dynamic where the refugee is expected to assimilate into a culture that is different from his or her own. Whereas integration is more of a two-way street. So it's really characterized by the coexistence of newcomer and host population. So it is defined as a mutual adaptation. So both sides accept equal responsibility, and it implies that the refugee is not the only one that has the burden of integrating. It refers to newcomers acquiring the core competencies of the host culture and society, which of course is very important. But at the same time, the integration process also takes place by the host, and the host society is changing and adapting to its new members. So some potential characteristics or indicators of this integration can be sociocultural change that the refugee undergoes, allows them to maintain their own identity while also adapting to their new environment. Friction between the host community and the refugee community is no worse than friction within the host community. Or refugees do not encounter more discrimination than exists between groups that were previously settled by the host community. So those are just some ideas. But one of the problems that we have here in the United States is really that we have not done enough research to really examine how successful has the integration of refugees been in this country. So there's very few longitudinal studies. I hope that there will be more in the future, but it's something that we as resettlement agencies, I know we're very involved in trying to promote so that it'll give us more data and we will be able to measure things better. And I just wanted to leave you with a brief anecdote because I visited Europe. I've visited twice since the beginning of the year because of the Europe refugee crisis. And I've been to Germany and Belgium and France. And one of the things that struck me in conversations with a number of people was there were two things. And the first one was that resettlement was being viewed as different from integration. And that struck me because for me, those two things go hand in hand. And if you're resettling people, then you have to support them in the integration process. And yet some of the people I talked to were putting it as two different categories. And then the second one was references to what we need is assimilation, not integration. And again, the idea with assimilation being that there is one dominant culture that others need to conform to. So those are just some thoughts. And now I'm going to leave it to my fellow panelists to delve more deeply into these topics. And I'll hand it over to Claudia.
Thank you. Thanks, Jennifer. Thank you, everyone, and thanks for including me in the panel today. So as Jennifer said, my name is Claudia Connor. I'm the president and CEO of the International Institute of Connecticut. We're based in Bridgeport, and we also have offices in Stamford and Hartford. We have been around for almost 98 years. We were established in 1918 by the YWCA as part of their International Institute movement, really providing direct services for immigrants and refugees across the country. There are, at this point, about 6 or 8 international institutes still around, and we're one of them. And we have a number of programs that direct service programs here in Connecticut. We do refugee resettlement in Bridgeport. We also have a statewide immigration legal services program for low-income immigrants. Through that, we serve about 4,000 people a year across the state. We also do anti-human trafficking work, and we work with survivors of torture as well. So I'm going to sort of build on, I guess, a little bit of what Jennifer was saying and kind of take it in a slightly different direction, maybe. But want to just give you a little bit of the lay of the land of refugee resettlement in Connecticut, since that's where we're sitting. There are 3 agencies in the state that do refugee resettlement work. The International Institute, or ICON, is based in Bridgeport. The Integrated Refugee and Immigrant Services, IRIS, is based here in New Haven. And Catholic Charities does refugee resettlement up in the Hartford area. Together this year, we will resettle about 750 or so people. Don't hold me to that because the people come through the State Department program, and so we don't know exactly how many we'll resettle. At ICON, we are chiefly resettling individuals from the Democratic Republic of Congo, Eritrea, Ethiopia, Colombia, and then to lesser degrees, Iraq, Afghanistan, and Syria. So like Jennifer, in preparation for coming here today, really thinking about the title of the panel, Assimilation or Autonomy, how culture can help the refugee crisis. And I think it's really important to kind of think about what we mean by culture, because I think there are a lot of different ways to look at it. And in a conversation that the 4 of us had in preparation for today, following that, Zeyba shared with us the Unesco definition of culture, which I think is helpful because it's very broad. And then you can sort of, find what you need within that. But it's a repository of knowledge, meanings, and values that permeate all aspects of our lives. Culture also defines the way human beings live and interact both at local and global scales. So this definition, because of its breadth, allows us to think of culture as encompassing art, morals, laws, traditional practices, norms, customs, beliefs, and really any other dimension that kind of help define who we are as individuals, as a nation, and in communities. As Jennifer described in giving the definition of a refugee, they are people who have been forced to flee their home countries as a result of persecution, war, and conflict. And most often, honestly, they leave and they flee with nothing more than what they are wearing or what they can carry. Their identity and their culture, which is a very part of each of our beings, they take with them, regardless of what else they may or may not have. And then the process of displacement. Many of the refugees that we are resettling, Congolese, have been in the media, we hear it takes 18 to 24 months for someone to become resettled. In fact, it is much closer to the average refugee is in a camp or displaced before resettlement for an average of 17 years. And we are resettling among the Congolese population. People have been in camps for generations. 10 and 15 years is the norm. So what we're seeing is really, in fact, sort of a much stronger attachment to their identity, to their culture, and to those traditions from their home communities and their home country. One of the primary goals of the U.S. Refugee Resettlement Program is self-sufficiency and integration into community, as Jennifer was saying. It's really one of the goals of the program. So I think it's important to look at integration, again, with multiple dimensions, both the social, economic, cultural, linguistic. And when we ask assimilation or autonomy, I would offer that there are elements of both that are important, but that neither alone will truly help the refugee crisis writ large, or here in Connecticut, or anywhere where refugees are resettling. And again, as Jennifer did, I think it's helpful to look at the definitions. Assimilation is really about becoming part of a different society or culture, adopting the ways of the other culture. And autonomy does imply sort of a separateness from the culture. So I think, in the refugee resettlement space, assimilation is not seen as something that's necessarily positive, because it does imply, as Jennifer said, that there's this sort of becoming part of and almost losing your own identity in that process, and getting kind of absorbed in that. So I would offer that integration is and should be the goal, where there's really an interweaving of cultures, of norms, beliefs, traditions, and that all of those are honored and respected, and that there's space created for sort of the best of all of it. So I think, the idea of this is almost kind of more like acculturation, where there's this interweaving of all of these differences and honoring the traditions and really enriching the existing culture with new sounds, tastes, ideas, thoughts, and beliefs. And this acculturation is really something where neither the new nor the old lose their identity, but really evolve into something kind of unexpected and enriched, and probably more complicated and maybe a little bit messier, but definitely more meaningful and authentic. I also wanted to touch on this sort of idea of preserving culture in the sense of art and kind of our cultural expression, because in the work that we're doing, we don't have an art program or a culture program at ICON, and most refugee. I mean, it would be wonderful if we did, and we have a lot of work that we're doing with the arts, but it's not a funded program. We do cultural and community orientation upon arrival, but I think that what we see in a sort of organic way is the importance of people's own gifts and cultural expression kind of rising to the surface. And I think that it's interesting to look at this both sort of outwardly and inwardly. On the internal side, what we see is that a lot of refugees are relying on their own sort of idea, their ability to draw or paint or sing or dance or write poetry as a way for them to heal and reconcile their own journey and find some restorative or restoration in their art. And then on sort of the outward side, the external side, it's a way, using cultural expression and art is a way to explain things to people, to educate them, to really describe and enlighten kind of what's going on for them and what their journey has been. I saw in the Guardian, the British paper, there was an artist, a Syrian artist living in the Zatari refugee camp in Jordan. His name is Ahmad Hariri, and he said art is a language that doesn't need to be translated. So it really, it transcends language that needs interpretation. And he spent many, many months while in Zatari building a replica of Palmyra, the Syrian desert city known as the Venice of Sands. And he used wooden kebab skewers to build this. Unbeknownst to him, as he approached the completion of this, having worked on it for months, ISIS was actually advancing on Palmyra, where they then destroyed, as we know, many of the antiquities there. We have,
You have another minute.
Okay. So a quick story from one of our Congolese clients. We have a very wonderful mentor program where we have community volunteers who are paired with refugees. One of the mentors of a Congolese family brought some crayons and paper and pencils for the children in the family. And several weeks later, she came back to the home and found that the father, who had been very closed and very traumatized, as one would be, had started drawing. And he was drawing pictures of things that he remembered from home, trees and home animals and structures. And then he started drawing things in his apartment in Bridgeport and outside the apartment in Bridgeport. And a few months later, she was able to find, she connected with an artist, a gallery in Ridgefield, and some of his drawings were shown there and sold. So, and for him, it was not only a way of sort of saying, this is what I remember and this is what's inside me, but it was also a real internal process of kind of opening up and using that art to really start a process of healing and thinking of how America there may be a future with security, with protection, with sort of hope for his children here. And so in the remaining seconds that I have, I did, and it was interesting that Mary Lou said, that it's really, the subject is really about home, and there's an incredibly powerful poem by a Somali poet, and I won't read the whole thing, but I just wanted to share the last couple of bits with you. It's called Home. Her name is Warsan Shire. She's a Somali poet who was born in a refugee camp in Kenya. And I think it's an example of how language can really capture incredibly powerfully and explain sort of the inexplicable. No one leaves home unless home is the mouth of a shark. You only run for the border when you see the whole city running as well. Your neighbor's running faster than you. The boy you went to school with who kissed you dizzy behind the old tin factory is holding a gun bigger than his body. You only leave home when home won't let you stay. I want to go home. But home is the mouth of a shark. Home is the barrel of a gun. And no one would leave home unless home chased you to the shore, unless home tells you to leave what you could not behind, even if it was human. No one leaves home until home is a damp voice in your ear saying, leave, run now. I don't know what I've become. Thank you.
Great.
Good afternoon. It's an honor to join such great panelists for this really important question. And I really want to thank the festival team for including such an important topic in this year's program. So picking up where Jennifer and Claudia have taken us, this is really an era-defining matter. And one way to address this humanitarian crisis is taking a look through the arts and cultural lens. And I think that it really helps us to understand the identity of those new arrivals that are joining our communities. And when we learn about their heritage, their cultural heritage, it gives us new respect for them. And in turn, it allows them a sense of dignity and empowers a real feeling of their distinctiveness. So I think that it's really, really important that we're talking about this topic. And this is where the arts can really play a central role. Through imaginative, multidisciplinary programs, they can provide innovative, imaginative solutions, use the word imagination, to communicate and draw people together through shared positive experiences. And my name is Zeyba Rahman, as Jennifer said earlier, and the program that I take care of is called Building Bridges, and it's housed within the Doris Duke Foundation for Islamic Art, which is based in New York. So we're a grant-making organization. And we firmly believe that this approach through the lens of the arts is impactful and really can make a real difference. In fact, in preparation for our talk today, was looking at some definitions of culture, and the one that I'm going to share with you is one stated by E.B. Taylor, the British 19th century British anthropologist. And he said that the social meaning of life is held in common by culture, and that a foundation of shared values and aspirations binds us together. So this is the belief, the mission of the Building Bridges program. And what we do is we support projects that are conceived by US-based nonprofit organizations and that are using the lens of, say, the literary arts, the media arts, or the performing arts to really remind us of our common bonds, of our shared ground, and our really universal hopes and aspirations. So let's take a look at two of the Building Bridges grantees to actually illustrate this further. And I forgot to click. I actually have a PowerPoint presentation for you. And let's go now to the Cedar Cultural Center in Minneapolis, Minnesota. It was awarded a grant to work with Somali refugees and the broader non-Somali population to create points of connection between them, particularly in an area called Little Mogadishu, which is in the Cedar Riverside community of Minneapolis. Believe it or not, it's the home of the largest Somali population outside Somalia. The Cedars idea was to be that bridge between the Somali and non-Somali community. And so they realized a project named Midnimo, which means unity in Somali. The program features Somali artists both from Minnesota and also from the larger diaspora, primarily. Not so much from Somalia, because what happened is that Somalia experienced almost 25 years of civil war, and then an Islamist government, a very, very puritanical government came into place, and they banned music. Since Somalia is known as the nation of poets and has a really rich musical history, the musicians really, the artists came under heavy pressure. Because one of their roles was also to speak out against what was not right in society. They were social commentators, are social commentators. And so they were speaking out against the warlords and militants that were terrorizing Somali society. And as a result, their lives were in grave danger. And their instruments were looted or destroyed. And music was declared by this really Cromwellian government as haram, which means forbidden in Islam. And so the Cedar, which is a mid-sized arts organization in Minneapolis, decided that they were going to connect Somali singers with live musical support that they helped to create, and I'll explain that in a second. And they then went about creating a partnership with a small Lutheran college, which was in the neighborhood of Little Mogadishu, called Augsburg College, which had very few Somali students, primarily from the broader Minnesotan community. And in starting the project, the planning for it, they discovered very quickly that in fact there were no musicians. There were vocalists, there were no musicians, because of exactly what I said a moment ago, that their instruments were looted, or they were put in jail and tortured, or just stopped their music because it's just too much for them. And so the Cedar approached the head of the music department of Augsburg College and said, can you help to somehow revive this musical tradition? And so Bob Stack, Professor Bob Stack, who's also the musical director, then decided to learn the music himself, to transcribe it, because it's primarily an oral tradition, almost entirely an oral tradition, and then teach it to his students, and then invite members of the Somali community in Little Mogadishu to come and jam with his students and ultimately create a house band. House meaning a backing band, which was absolutely amazing. So then the Cedar could invite vocalists from various parts of the world and from within the US as well. So began an experiment. And let's see here. I have, once again, fallen behind on my slides. You see, I'm not a major PowerPointist, but I am trying here. So, as you can see from the slide, the partnership for the program included partnerships on campus, on the Augsburg College campus, with different departments, including the nursing department, and you'll learn about that in a second, politics, international affairs, religion, gender. These are obvious partners, but nursing was a particularly interesting one. And since its launch in October 2014, this project has served over 10,000 audience members, including 2,000 K through 12 students. A very important demographic because minds are shaped early on, as we know. So that's a really important component. And then they began to expand their partnerships throughout the state and began taking the musicians now with this house band that they had in place to smaller communities throughout the state of Minnesota, including Mankato and St. Cloud, which has both have sizable Somali refugee populations. An awful lot of tension there between the non-Somali and the Somali population, primarily from the non-Somali side, because they're smaller cities and they're having a hard time understanding who these newcomers are. So over the next 3 years, the Cedar expects to reach an additional 10,000 people, and they intend to cast their net far and wide through the state of Minnesota. To learn a bit more, I'm going to play you a clip.
Thank you for coming out tonight. After 1990, like after the Civil War, there's been lack of live Somali music. And I think you can tell by the work around this area, Cedar, there's been a revival of Somali music.
MNEMO is a program at the Cedar and Augsburg College that builds knowledge and understanding of Somali Muslim culture through music. MNEMO consists of week-long residencies with Somali musical artists from Minnesota and around the world. These residencies are providing a platform for students to develop an understanding of Somali Muslim culture through artist-led interventions on campus and in the community.
There are about 10 to 15 different events and activities that are part of each MNEMO residency, and I would say over half of those activities are geared specifically towards Augsburg students and millennials. But these students aren't just showing up to experience these events, they're also involved in the planning and the marketing and the documenting of the entire MNEMO program. And some of these students are even performing on stage with the artists. So they're highly invested in the MNEMO program.
This is really the first time I've kind of stepped out of my comfort zone and played music from different cultures. By doing this, by playing this music, I feel personally a lot more connected to Somali culture. Spending all this time with these artists has kind of broadened my vision as far as the culture here in Minneapolis and just how much more diverse it is than people think.
So we've been working with faculty members across all different departments at Augsburg College, and it always surprises me how relevant it seems to every single faculty member that we've worked with. So far we've worked with more than 10 faculty members, and that's included people in the theater department, the music department, political science, globalization, gender studies, creative writing, and even health and nursing.
Originally, for my community health course, our motto was going to come, And Sarah Noor, who is this new CEO of People Center, helped start the Health Commons. And when she had heard about our involvement with Medimo, she was like, how about they come to People Center and bring awareness around a community health center that's really focused on the needs of the community. And so it worked out great. We had a very private venue, and we were able to ask questions around health and healing to the artists and had great discussions. The discussion from that event led to just so many great discussions in the classroom afterwards that I don't know that would have happened, because it really broke down some barriers as far as, let's talk about this and engage, and it's okay to talk about this. It's okay to talk about our differences.
The Medimo Project and the CETA have gone on to receive the first ever arts grant from the Blue Cross Blue Shield Foundation in Minnesota. As a result, they wanted them to continue this program. The other grant that we gave was to an organization that tells stories, and by that I mean a media outlet. As we know, the stories that we tell ourselves and each other really shape our thinking and help us make sense of the world around us. And we gave a grant to News Deeply. Here we are. Which is an independent digital media syndicate that develops news platforms around single issues. News Deeply came to our attention as a game changer in telling in-depth stories about topical issues. It has emerged as one of the leading online platforms for deep reporting and analysis. And Lara Satrakian, who you see here on the slide, is a co-founder and was a Bloomberg News and ABC News reporter on the ground working from Iraq and other parts of the Middle East for 5 years before she went ahead and founded this news syndicate, because they found that with the economic crisis that media outlets are experiencing and the cutbacks that they were forced to make, that actually analysis and in-depth reporting was really suffering. She saw the gap, and she built this platform, and she came to us after we heard that Time magazine had called her model the future of news, and that they had received an Excellence in Online Journalism Award from the National Press Foundation. So if only I could learn how to advance PowerPoint. Could tell my story faster and better. As you see here, the statistics on refugees is really staggering. So we're very concerned about this issue, even though we're focused on arts, and that's the lens that we use. So we partnered with Lara and her team and became the anchor founder for the development of a new platform called Refugees Deeply. And it's a comprehensive source of news reporting and is on the News Deeply website. So if you click on it, you'll see it pretty quickly. It was launched on March 15th this year. And really looks at focused coverage, long format reporting, and short format, but really in-depth coverage on the geopolitical, economic, legal, and environmental issues as they play a role in the refugee crisis. So really, these are the two grants that I thought were pertinent to our topic. And I'm going to leave you with one last thought before I conclude, and that is from my 6-year-old friend named Gibran, who recently brought up something to his mom, my friend Mimi, and he said, "Do you know what the secret of life is, Mom?" And she thought for a bit, and she said, "What do you think it is?" And he said, "Mom, people change people." Mm-hmm. So those are words to live by. Thank you for listening. Mm-hmm.
So I guess it's my turn. I want to thank the panelists for sharing their amazing work, amazing stories. My name is Sokeo Ros. I am an artist, activist, youth advocate, and mentor at Everett Company Station School based in Providence, Rhode Island. I'm director of the hip hop dance program there, and I run a youth company called Case Closed, and we allow them to perform and teach professionally. We also offer kids free classes in the performing arts and movie making, anything from dance to Polynesian, for free if they can afford to pay, and that's how I started. I couldn't afford to take dance classes. I don't know how many of you here are refugees or was born in a refugee camp. I was born in a refugee camp in Thailand. My parents escaped the Khmer Rouge era, the whole regime there. They walked about 3 days from Cambodia to the Thailand border, and they had to trace their steps because of landmines and everything else, and we made it there. And that's where I was born, in a place called Sokeo. So my name is Sokeo Ros. Sokeo for the place that I was born at. Vuti was a name given to me by a monk because I was a very, very sick child. My parents took me to a monk and they blessed me and then did their medications and things and gave me some new things and named me Vuti, and they kept calling me that ever since. I got better. My last name is Ros. In Cambodian, it means to survive or to live. So in your names itself, there's a history to it, right? But the thing is, I didn't know any of this for a very, very long time. When we were sponsored to come to the United States, my family, my parents, and my mom, whatever, they were on survival mode the whole time. Because going through the whole Khmer Rouge era, you had to survive. My father was in the Cambodian army. When he finally escaped and they found him again, he told them that he was a fisherman to avoid execution. My mother lost 6 kids. So I had 6 brothers and sisters before me, due to starvation and everything else that was going on. When I was born in the camps, there was no hospital. There was a big rig truck. The back of it was their first medical center, in a sense. And these are the things, the conditions that we were going through. Now, being sponsored to the United States, we went from California to Iowa, and then finally to Rhode Island. And the only reason we moved to Rhode Island because there was a jury district that was hiring you and didn't ask any questions and paid cash. I mean, we weren't here illegally. We were resident aliens, but the money wasn't right. So we had to move halfway across the country to do that. Now, in doing so, we didn't know where we were going. And we moved and was placed right into a gang neighborhood. Very impoverished. The house that we lived at was an actual gang household. Now, they didn't bother us just because they worked with my father at a dye factory, and he drove them to work every single day. So I grew up in the gang life. I went to school where there were all gangs. On the street that I was at, there was one end of the street, there was this plastic factory, and all you could smell was melted plastic throughout the whole street. On the other end of the street, there was chickens running around, a transvestite prostitute. There was prostitution on the other end of the street, and I was in the middle of it. So I'm growing up with these kinds of things, and I thought this was normal. You know what I mean? And my lemonade truck sold drugs. There was a truck that would ride down the street selling stolen bikes. But I didn't know that. Because what I was living in was my reality at the moment. There was no kind of integration, that you guys were talking about earlier. There was nothing, all there was assimilation, and we were the lower parts of that. But I didn't know that. And I would hear stories that my parents would tell me about back in the day when they went through this, they went through that, we had to save a grain of rice just to eat, and this and that. And I would just take it out in one ear, out the other. I was raising myself as an American child, not knowing that I wasn't in America. And things didn't change for a long time. And I lost a really big part of me, which is my culture, my history, my traditions. Because again, when my parents came to the United States, they were in survival mode. We had to make ends meet. We had to eat somehow. We had to make sure you go to school. And with doing so, they had very limited education. So I had to teach myself certain things, do my homework. They couldn't help. And because I had to grow up so fast, I lost a big part of my childhood and a big part of myself. I grew up thinking I was a Buddhist like every other Asian. I didn't know that my family were Muslims. They grew up in a Muslim village in Cambodia. But because they were attacked first and was destroyed and slaughtered, my mom dropped the whole religion. So when I came here, because of what I learned in school, I thought Asians were Buddhists. And that's what I grew up thinking I was. I didn't find out until high school that my family was actually Muslim. So religion was not a big part of me, I guess, as you can tell now. What saved me was, and then I was going down the wrong route, you know. To be honest, at the age of 15, I went to this place called Everett that I'm teaching at now. And they saw me dance. I was dancing just because it was a hobby back then, right? The gang members did it, everybody else did it, so let me just try it out. And it was fun. So I went to this place, and the director, Dorothy Jungle, she saw me dance. After the whole thing, she comes up and asks me, hey, do you want to do this school show? It's an educational school show about anti-tobacco, right? And we'll give you 15 to 20 bucks. You get pizza or McDonald's, and you get to skip school. So I'm thinking to myself, I'm 15, 16 years old. I get money and food, and I get to skip school? Sign me up. Let's go, I'm ready. And I did it, and I fell in love with performance, and I just kept doing it. At the age of 18, I started teaching. At the age of 19, they asked me to go on my first tour. And I fell in love with community. I fell in love with the work that I've been doing with them. I fell in love with how one person can actually affect a whole bunch of people in a certain way. And they did that with me. So, but with that, I still was losing a certain part of myself. Now I was integrating into the arts culture and performance and everything else. You know, if that wasn't there, I'd either be dead or in jail. The arts, hip-hop, performance saved my life. As cliche as it sounds, that's what I was drawn to. After the whole gang and everything else. And again, I still didn't know exactly who I was. I'm not an American. I didn't get my citizenship until right before Obama's election. That was my first time, voting for president. Or voting in general. Until 2013, when I decided to go back to school for the third time because I kept dropping out. They asked me to do an exhibition. There were no exams. Do an exhibition. Cool. I'll do a fundraiser for a nonprofit. Easy. I can do that with my eyes closed. But my director came to me and she said, how about you do something that's a little bit more meaningful for you? Not for anybody else, but for you. And then in 2005, I was on a tour called Home Movies. And it dealt with 5 individuals and their personal stories. I didn't know mine. I had to interview my parents. For the first time ever, talking to them like that, for 3 or 4 hours. And it just hit me physically, emotionally, mentally. I had to leave the room so many times because I didn't know any of these things. I didn't know my own culture, my own history. So in 2013, I wanted to go back into that. And I wrote a grant, I got approved, and I went to Cambodia for the first time. And I met my family for the first time. And certain things are just... It's probably the best experience of my life. And because of that, I decided to do a one-man show based on my story and my life experience as a refugee and coming in here and trying to assimilate and then integrate and then lose myself culturally and then finding myself later on the stage as an artist. And these are the things that I didn't know about myself, which is why my story, your story, everybody's story is so important. Because it builds that relationship, it builds empathy, and it builds understanding. So we can understand each other a little bit more. Beyond the surface, beyond the skin color, beyond the religion. And this is what helped me. I've been in 5 national tours with my company. And every single tour that I've been on, I found something new about myself. And this is the only therapy that helps me out. Because growing up, there was no therapy, there was no talk. You know, since they were on survival mode the whole time, I had to raise myself, raise my brother, raise my sister. So we didn't get happy birthdays, holidays, I love yous, hugs, kisses, anything like that. We didn't grow up with it. All those things, Santa Claus, Christmas, New Year's, I learned that from school. I got my first hug from my father in 2014 when I graduated college. You know, and in 2014 was when we also took our first family portrait. And because of this art, this was able to happen. And I want to end on a note where in my show that I do, I use certain musics that I really enjoyed growing up. And I didn't grow up with this kind of music. I've heard it because of movies that I watched. Louis Armstrong is a big one. What a Wonderful World. And the other one is Imagine by John Lennon. And at the end of it, I speak about how my parents now, so the end of it is, my father's not as angry anymore. He's completely different from what I grew up with. He's more calm. My mother still works a factory job, and she hates it. She gets up at 4:30 every single morning just to get ready to go to work. But she gardens every single day, and she takes care of a garden as if they were her own kids. And she takes pictures of her flowers and posts them on Facebook. And the garage is my father's sanctuary. He has his little karaoke system. He has his little fridge, his lawn chair. And he would open up the garage doors and sit underneath the trees, feeding his birds and his squirrels, and listen to his karaoke music while having a beer. And this is life to him right now. And it's weird that happiness is coming out organically, and that survivor mode is fading away. And I told you guys earlier that we didn't have, hugs and kisses and stuff. Another thing that we didn't have was family dinners, right? We never got a chance to sit down and talk with each other while having a meal. Usually it's, once you get your food, you finish, go clean it up, back to what you're doing. So I want to thank you guys for having me, because I consider this my family dinner. So I appreciate you guys very much for doing this, and you guys doing your work that you do so, because it's very, very important. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much to all three of you for these amazing presentations.